we persisted in our advocacy, and precisely we were able to develop the program, and until now we have graduated several people. And because we believe that these military people, they also need to be educated, because later on these people will take on important positions in society, and they will be in the position to influence policy, laws, and other things. Now, I would like to. I have written here a short paragraph which summarizes the philosophy behind our peace education, and I would like to read this to you. So, I would like to opine that perhaps somewhere in the human evolution, violence has inserted itself and has defined human relationships and interactions for millions of years. But in this evolution, human intelligence has a great part in shaping that future. Therefore, if we could educate the human mind, each individual will be empowered to change this relationship, to mold it, and to shape it to a more peaceful and happy future. Our philosophy is somewhat. The other day, I no, some other time, I read a book. That kind of book is called. The title of the book is Demonic Males, and it was written by Richard Wrangham and Dale Peterson, and it is a very concise analysis of explaining the origin of violence, and why the male species is prone to violence. And they came to that idea that people are that the male and the human species are actually violent in some way. But trying to connect it with the study of primatology, they found out that among the species, from the earliest forms of our species, then to the different kinds of species as it evolves, they found out that that this that the species where we belong to has the capacity to mold and change their relationship and modify their relationship. Although there is the presumption that the male species is superior because physically males are bigger, they are stronger, powerful. But in the end, they said that this kind of relationship between male and female can be negotiated by the use of our intelligence, and we can modify and change that relationship from more of a dominance towards that part of cooperation and complementarity. So so somehow our philosophy is like that. And we said that we believe that the potential of the human mind is limitless, and hence that is so we could educate the mind towards peace and arrive at a win-win solution. But we also don't believe that peace education is a panacea that would solve our problems. It does not even promise to solve all these problems at once, but it is a way forward. So we are guided by a combination of pragmatism and idealism. So in our dealings with the military, we believe that 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 the legitimate use of violence is a fact. And even William Penn realized in his when he established the Penn State in the U.S. then, with this group of pacifists, they came to realize that being non-violent in a more radical way was impossible at the time, because what will you do if like for example, if the native Indians would raid their community? What would you do? Would you just sit down and do nothing because you say that you're a peace advocate and you're not going to kill people, and that you're not going to defend yourself? But they found out that it was impossible, because there are certain realities that we have to confront, and then we have to deal with it. So that is our pragmatism. So we realize that we accept the fact that the state has the legitimate use of violence. But on the other hand, we are also guided by our idealism, that we can modify this kind of behavior and this kind of way of thinking. And especially with the security reform agenda of the government of my country, we were able to successfully introduce some libertarian concepts among the military, which in fact today we saw them, which is changing now the shape of the military. In fact, they are more attuned at human rights. They are aware of human rights. They are more compliant with all these international instruments about human rights, and they are conscious about it. And I think that's the work that we have been doing for the last several years. And then, okay, just a few more words here. We should accept the reality that first, violence exists, and that violence is both used in a bad way, and sometimes it can be used as a contingency to prevent the bad from doing more harm. So we have to accept that state uses legitimate coercion, and it is an existential reality that even William Penn has to recognize. But with the introduction of peace education, we can creatively shape our world and even the way individuals, communities, and governments react to certain situations. And in my personal experience as professor and a consultant, I have been dealing with military people, and I know and I realized that some of these people, sometimes the common people, they have this stereotype of these military people. They thought that they are violent people, unreasonable. But actually, if you engage them in a dialogue um, and persuade them, actually, they are also very reasonable and very open. And I find them to be intelligent and to be perceptive of the things that you say. So if we open this avenue for dialogue, I think we could shape and change the future. And I remember that that statue in New York, in the United Nations the building. There's the image there of a man flowing. Yeah. So actually, it is a biblical. It was taken from. It is inspired by the biblical verse from the Bible, which says that in the coming future, people will turn their weapons into pruning hooks. So therefore, they will change their weapons from into something more productive. So I think that is the ideal of our peace education, and that is our vision. And we are moving towards that vision. But we are also guided by pragmatism and accepting the present reality and taking up the challenge of changing this reality, even relationships, and even challenging our beliefs and ideas. But I know that today we are confronted by so many challenges, not only this pandemic, but also the political climate around the world, like the rise of political extremism, which at a certain point in time would also make us irrelevant in society. But we have to confront this challenge and to make our voices heard. And I think that even these people who are extreme right, they can still be. We could engage with them in a dialogue rather than taking the opposite side. Maybe we could engage them in dialogue and persuade them to perhaps change their mind. And I think this is the guiding philosophy of our peace education, and we are still moving forward. And today, actually, we have revised our curriculum, and I'm also glad to inform my friend Vidya Jain that we have introduced a new course. It's called the Philosophy of Peace, and almost 75% of the content of that course is on Gandhi. Of course, it also shares the ideas of Martin Luther King, and also some of the like the philosophy of Leo Tolstoy, etc., etc. So I think that is the first time, because actually Gandhi is known historically everywhere in the world, but I've never seen any university in my country that has offered a course or something like that about Gandhi. And his ideas are. We're trying to work on his ideas so that we can also introduce it to our students. So thank you very much, and I hope that I was able to deliver what was asked of me. And thank you for this opportunity to Bejas and also to Vidya for inviting me in this forum.
the defund the police, or reform the police movement in the United States, in which we're having some discussions. Perhaps you maybe if you can hear me, invite our third speaker, Dr. Steve Shara, to proceed. We really look forward to what you have to add from your site in Malawi and your more diverse academic development and experience. Thank you, Steve. We may be having some instability in the internet. Is it possible to do anything from the from our host in Delhi? Ah, beautiful. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
We are hoping to get Steve on. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Steve. Steve is there. Steve is there. Can you hear us, Steve? Actually, sometimes in the place that we are, when that is down, then it becomes extremely difficult to. So, Steve. Yes, Steve is there. Steve.
We're all in this learning phase and these electrical connectivity challenges. So please, I ask for your patience.
Steve Shara,
okay. I think I managed to unmute. Can people hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
thank you very much.
I prepared a PowerPoint, so I want to see if I can share my screen. But with my my buttons freezing, if it doesn't work, I'll just go to the presentation. But trying to click here anyway. It doesn't seem to be working. Okay, so I'll go straight to my presentation. I gave it the title, Peace of COVID-19. And I want to touch on 5 or 6 points. I want to focus on the concept that we use, at least in this part of the continent in Africa, when we talk about peace, when we think of peace. And that concept has got different names, but in my country, Malawi, it's called Ubuntu. In other parts of the continent, in South Africa, they call it Ubuntu. And it's very close to what Dr. Jane mentioned earlier, the concept that you are, therefore I am. So I'll talk about that a little bit. And then I'll talk about what peace education looks like, at least in the Malawian curriculum, very briefly. And then I'll also talk about non-violence. Both on the continent, especially in a historical context, as well as here in Malawi. And then there has been a movement in Malawi in the last 2 years. It's been called Gandhi Must Fall. It's coming out of some literature that has been a few books published around Gandhi and are causing some controversy. And we have had that controversy here in Malawi as well. And then I'll finish by talking about what the opportunities that COVID-19 gives us. I mean, it's a nightmare, but at least there are a few opportunities that we can use to rethink education, especially peace education. So, Peter, you can't see my PowerPoint because I wanted to show you pictures of 2012 when I visited Gandhi Darshan in New Delhi, and I took some pictures. There was a conference that it was titled, the theme of the conference was Teacher Education for Peace and Harmony. And it was organized by a number of organizations, including the Institute for Advanced Studies in Education, deemed university in Sadar Shahar, and also the Global Harmony Association, and others too. It attracted 150 delegates from around the world, so it was quite a privilege to come and to visit the campus and to be with everyone. So I few pictures there at the Gandhi Darshan, and one of them was a picture of Gandhi, and it had a quote from Gandhi. He was asking, will our world always be one of violence? Will there always be poverty, starvation, misery? Will we have a firm and wide belief in religion, or will the world be godless? Is there to be a great change in society? How will that change be wrought? By war or revolution? Will it come peacefully? And he concluded that quote by saying, the world of tomorrow must be a society based on non-violence. That is the first law. Out of it all, other blessings will flow. And then I also found a picture of Martin Luther King in his office. And he was saying, I go to other countries as a visitor. I have come to India as a pilgrim. So as I prepared for my paper in 2012, one of the books I read was titled, You Are, Therefore I Am, a declaration of by Satish, and he was famously known for his earlier book, No Destination. And what struck me in that book by Satish Kumar was his explanation that in Hindu culture, Hindu as a religion, there was a saying that was exactly the same as how we say it in Africa, you are, therefore I am, only maybe different language, because I think it's in Sanskrit, but he says, in Hindi, it's Sohum. That's S-O-H-U-M. Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Because I didn't know how to pronounce it. And so it is very interesting because that's exactly the saying we also use here in Southern Africa. And he did mention that word actually in his book, Satish Kumar. He referred to Ubuntu as a concept and said they are very, very similar. So you have that concept in Indian society, and we also have it here in African society. And it's what frames peace, as well as peace education, at least in the work that I've done around peace education. In Malawi, the primary language is Chichewa, which is my first language. And we also have a proverb that explains that concept as well. When you translate it, it says, alone, you are as good as an animal in the bush, but in the company of you are a human being. Whereas in isiZulu, that's another language in South Africa, they say a person is a person through other people. And that's the same concept that Satish Kumar was explaining, that you are not human until there is another human being there. So it's that other human being who makes you human. And so you owe your humanity to other people. And so this is where we get our idea that we really are here to look after one another, rather than to look at ourselves as individuals. So, so being human is therefore the foundation of peace and social justice. And it was also the foundation of the struggles for independence in much of Africa in the sense. So in fighting for independence to end colonialism, several countries used nonviolence as their method of struggle. And I'll say a little bit more about this when I get to some of the literature that talks about this. It's in my PowerPoint. I will share the PowerPoint, I think, afterwards for anybody who would be interested. But nonviolence as a philosophy also informed the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa. They had that process ending apartheid and then starting a new philosophy. They depended a lot on nonviolence and also on Ubuntu, because both Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu believed in Ubuntu and in nonviolence, and they believed that there was it was very, very important for the communities or the groups in South Africa to live together in harmony after the end of apartheid. Of course, they've got challenges that didn't happen, but at least the philosophy is still there, and there are people still working on it in research and also in other kinds of things. So here in my PowerPoint, I have this book titled Guns and Gandhi in Africa, Pan-African Insights on Nonviolence, Armed Struggle and Liberation in Africa. It was written by Bill Sutherland together with Matt Meyer, who is in the audience right there, and he shared a link. He's the Secretary General for IPRA. And so it's a book that visits several countries on the continent, talks to people who were involved in the struggle for independence, and they confirm that many of them used nonviolence as their method because they believed in its superiority compared to the use of violence. Of course, as Dr. Rosanna was saying, there are times when you have to be realistic, and you see that sometimes people will use violence as a way to address a problem. And we did have cases of violence in some of these struggles, but at least for quite a few countries, including here in Malawi, nonviolence was the method that they used. And so in that book that I just mentioned, the foreword is written by Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa. And he says, I have a quote here from the foreword. He says, when some of us in the dark days of apartheid proclaimed our belief that all violence was evil, but not equal, that some violence was born of a horrible choice between continued oppression or a violent overthrow of the oppressive regime, there was much misunderstanding about that position. Were we adherents of Gandhi, whose notions of soul force were not only developed in South Africa, but were based on some concepts he learned in South Africa? Were we apologists for the guerrillas who were, of course, labeled terrorists by the real terrorists of the world? So in approaching peace education, my argument has been that it must be the foundation of all education. We must look at all education as peace education. And when you do that, it opens up a lot of ways of understanding education, understanding the purpose of education and the content that we impart to students, the curriculum or the pedagogy, the interactions between students and teachers. It just changes everything. And so on the continent, people have resorted to peace education after an event. So in Kenya, in 2007, they had violence after an election that went wrong. And some people were killed. It was quite violent. And afterwards, they thought, oh, we need a peace education curriculum. In Zimbabwe, they have also had some problems, and they have also found, at least looked for ways to bring peace into their curriculum, same as in Rwanda and South Africa. Here in Malawi, the National Center for Curriculum, it's called the Malawi Institute for Education, also wants peace to be taught in the curriculum. And they have suggested that it should be integrated into different subjects, especially social studies and life skills. So there are different concepts there, including conflict resolution. And this is also found at the teacher training level, although I am arguing that we need more deliberate way of approaching it. 2019 here in Malawi was probably the most violent year, especially at the school level. There were quite a number of disagreements between students and the school management and head teachers, and they resulted into violence because they weren't resolved in a peaceful way. To the extent that earlier this year, the Ministry of Education issued guidelines for how conflicts should be resolved because it was too much. So every week you were hearing about students rioting and then demolishing their school, setting fire to a school or damaging their school in one way or another. And I think one reason is that say we are teaching peace education in the curriculum, we are not teaching non-violence, and that it is a powerful way, a superior way of resolving differences. And so that's at least our task here in Malawi as far as peace education is concerned. Malawi has got quite a history of violent revolutions. So our independence struggle, we got our independence in 1964. It was largely non-violent. So the methods that using non-violence and some of the leading proponents, the activists who were at the forefront of that struggle, read Gandhi and they understood Gandhi. There was remarkable collaboration, support from India for our independence. We don't talk about that today. People think it's history, it's not in the curriculum, but there was a lot of support from the first president of not first president, but Jawaharlal Nehru, for example, he provided support, and the Indians who were in this country at the time were part of the struggle for independence. These issues today are not taught in the curriculum, and there is quite some tension. I'll talk about that, I think, when I conclude in a few minutes. But at least the point I'm making is that our struggle for independence used non-violent methods. And then we had a dictatorship for 30 years in which you had a negative peace, as I think Janet was mentioning earlier, where, and also Professor Jenkins, I think he mentioned this idea of negative peace when he, it's opposed to positive peace when people are focusing on building the society and dealing with issues of inequality and so on. Malawi was a dictatorship for 30 years, and you couldn't speak because the state, somebody in the comments pointed out that it's the state that defines what is legitimate use of violence or not. And that was very true in the Malawi of the 30 years from 1964. And then we had a revolution to change the system of government to multi-party democracy, and that also was largely non-violent. And then this year, 2020, we have got what people are calling a third republic, because since 1994, we have been ruled by parties, and somewhere along the way, the ideals that guided the 1994 change were lost. And in 2019, we had an election. It didn't end very well. It was disputed. And then we had another election. The court ruled that there has to be another election. And now we have a new government, and people are saying this is a new republic, third republic, and it has been non-violent, although some of that, the demonstrations that were part of the resistance to that, some of them ended up in a violent way, again, probably because we are not teaching non-violence as a strategy, part of what I think we must do. So let me come to the Gandhi Must Fall movement that started in 2018 when I think the city of Blantyre, one of our biggest cities here, was going to install a statue of Gandhi. And then a group of young people got together and said, we can't. And then they, I think they had read a book by Ashwin Desai and Ghulam Vahed in 2015 titled The South African Gandhi, Stretcher Bearer of Empire. And I think they also went into the archive, the Gandhi Heritage Archive, where everything that Gandhi wrote has been deposited, and they were looking at the things that he was writing when he was in South Africa. And so there's been this debate across the continent and also in other parts, they have been pulling down statues of Gandhi, saying he was racist, especially toward Black people. So I joined the debate on Facebook, on Twitter, social media, and I also wrote a few blog posts around that. And I was saying that it was an opportunity for us to teach about nonviolence and to focus on Gandhi's contribution to that concept. And so I argued that, yes, I think nobody is denying that there were these faults. As a human being, he had his own weaknesses. No human being is perfect, but we must look at him in a holistic way. And also look at the long life, because he left South Africa at the turn of the century and then lived for another 34 years. And towards the end of his life, he got involved in the struggle for, and his views evolved over time. Other people were saying, well, but what did he say about Black people towards the end of his life? And I haven't gotten to that part in the archive. I think part of the research that we must continue carrying out. But as a peace educator, my position has been that let the students hear all the sides of the argument, so that when they're making their own arguments, they should make them from an informed position. But I think an underlying issue here in Malawi is racial tensions, also with a class element to them. That's what I think these young people are reacting against, because we're a society that is quite class-based, and also, although the Black people are the dominant population in Malawi, the class system makes it that foreigners tend to have more power and more privileges than Black Malawians, and this creates a lot of resentment, and that's what these young people are reacting against, and this must be acknowledged. It must be dealt with. Otherwise, it derails the process and also the progress we're talking about in teaching peace. We formed a Gandhi Consultative Forum as a reaction to that, to try and teach people about Gandhi and nonviolence. And there are a few courses in some of our universities that are teaching peace and conflict resolution. But we need to do this in a better way. And I was very happy to see that the Gandhi, Smriti, and Darshan have got these programs on nonviolent communication, and we will take advantage of these courses so that we can reach teachers as well as students, so that we can use that. So in conclusion, I just want to say that COVID-19, with the disruption that it has given us, has now we are more aware of structural inequality. And it's been a class issue, mostly those of lower incomes. Females have been hit quite hard, especially in Malawi. There have been teenage pregnancies that have risen very sharply, and it's also a class issue here. And looking at all of this, Ubuntu comes out as a really important concept for us to use in addressing the pandemic. There was this mention of the importance of human dignity. I think Janet mentioned that, and very, very important concept of human dignity, respecting everyone. So I think the pandemic gives us an opportunity to rethink the whole education system. I was reading an article the other day from an NGO called Dream a Dream. I think they're based in India. It was published on the World Innovation Summit for Education website. And it was saying, maybe as schools reopen, as we go back to school, can we bring a happiness curriculum? One that can emphasize kindness towards each other. And they're suggesting quite a few things to say, reintegrate the students when schools, don't just go straight into academics. Spend a few months reintegrating them, providing some psychosocial support, finding out what they have been through, because some of them have been through violent contexts during this pandemic. And so maybe de-emphasize examinations, because not everyone is going to do well. They need to heal from all of this. And so an emphasis on well-being, and therefore it will require supporting school leaders, especially head teachers and also teachers, so that together we rethink education and we make this education an important part of all of education. Thank you very much. Bahut Danyavad.
Thank you so much for that very fine. Yes, thank you to all our speakers. That's my echo I hear, and I hope you don't hear the machines on my street at the moment. But thank you so much. That was very fine. Let me make some quick summary points. First of all of our speakers, we're from Malawi in Africa, from the Philippines in South Asia, from India, from Washington, D.C., and we sometimes joke the People's Republic of New York. We are all emphasizing human dignity, the how to deal with violence. Let me say, he who hits first has run out of ideas. So peace education is to educate for alternatives to violence, and that Ubuntu, an important concept we see, goes across continents, the human dignity, the sense that I am because you are, and the fact that we must consider who decides when violence is legitimate. Can it be in the hands of the state? Are we all morally, ethically responsible? And those who are privileged, such as the military or the police, to engage in violence, what are the education for those people? How do they fit into the society? What are the constraints? And what are the moral parts of the education also? The human social parts. We now must all also acknowledge the extensive influence of Gandhi and nonviolence, including qualified pacifism and a way of life and on the society and on the political institutions and relations. Now, I'm so grateful to be a part of this. And I think that we have, in a sense, run out of time. So, Dr. Vidya and Dr. Veda, how shall we proceed with the Q&A? Do we have time to take some questions?
Probably we can take one or two questions, ma'am, because already, of course, we have overshoot the time. But in case someone has some important, relevant question for any of the speakers, we could encourage. In case anyone wanting to ask any questions, specific questions to any of the speakers, kindly write in the chat box so that we can ask the question to the specific speaker.
Barbara Barnes is there if she wants to say something. Barbara?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, yes, Madam Barbara is there.
Barbara wants to say something?
I'm trying to unmute myself. Well, thank you very much for calling on me. I'm from New York, and I have appreciated my experiences with the International Institute for Peace Education for many, many years. And there are some familiar faces here. And there is much wisdom that I have heard. And I can't think of anything new, particularly. Just one thought came to mind. The Ubuntu, very important international from Africa and also from India idea that I am because we are, or and I think of our context in the United States, and I know that within groups, intra-group, people can be practicing this philosophy, but then from groups that are outside of their own community, there's a big difference, and they don't translate the human dignity and the respect beyond their own communities. And so maybe a question that I'm left with, because I think our work in the United States around peace education has to be very inclusive, and we have to include the many different racial and national groups that are within our own geography. So I don't know if anybody can comment on that dilemma. How do we, is it incremental that people expand their notion of who's part of their world and their community? Is it a paradigm shift so that we actually think that we are one of humanity in the whole world? And I know this is something that we struggle with. So, but thank you very much for this whole time together.
Thank you.
Also, Vidya ma'am, Janet ma'am is asking you to kindly invite Evelyn Linder
Yeah.
to speak a few words.
Yeah, I can. Evelyn, you are most welcome. Please come up. Where is Evelyn? Evelyn Lindgren. Oh, hi. Yeah.
I'm so honored that you asked me, and I'm so honored to be with you. It's just a joy, Tony, to see you, Janet, to be together with you. We know each other for 20 years, and to be connected now in these difficult times is a huge privilege. And as some of you may know, I'm the founding president of the Human Dignity and Humiliation Studies Fellowship. So our entire work focuses on the notion of human dignity and what dignity means and what humiliation means. So your work is in the middle of what the future of our planet needs. I'm in deep, deep admiration and gratitude for all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Veda, we get a new theme for the next webinar. It will be human dignity, actually.
Yeah,
Let's have a
human
full,
dignity, that's
yeah,
an important reverence of life.
very, very
I
important. Yeah.
have a question here. Of course, this is aimed at Gandhi Smriti on the importance of peace education in the context of the National Education Policy 2020. Possibly, we're planning to have a separate meeting in that context, the context of the new education policy 2020. Possibly, we will be dealing with that in that particular meeting, which will be more national in its, in its perspective. As it is a global meeting, we might probably miss that question. And in case anyone else have any question, otherwise, I think we can request Janet ma'am to give a concluding remark for the day. I don't see any other question. So I think we should request Janet ma'am give her final comments before we depart.
Okay, I am so grateful to the speakers and for our wide audience. You can see that it's a sort of natural development that people all over the world are concerned with peace. And what does that mean? How do you do it? Who conceives of it and what is legitimate? And then especially for every one of you who is here participating, we invite you and recognize that education is the means to build peaceful societies that incorporate these values, these processes and means, these understandings of nonviolence, of respect and dignity and valuing the individual, and the extremely challenging visions of how to build a society and build institutions that incorporate these values and respect and further what the the Convention of the Rights of the Child also identify as protection, provision, and prevention, provision, and protection. And from there to build constructively. And that we have many ways to understand the pedagogy of peace, that it is a pedagogy for everyone, including the military, including the peace police, and including, might I add, our governors, presidents, and parliamentarians. And I thank Tony for these added epistemologies that in Latin America they call senta pensantes, the combination of feeling and thinking that include methodologies for creative construction, such as play, imagining, and interpreting without judging, and making games that can help us prepare for the realities of participation. I thank Dr. Rosanna for Herbert. Thank you for your insights into the challenge and the resistance to educating the police and military, and the questions of, is that antithetical, or how might we consider that across societies where certain groups have the capacities and the armaments for harm? How do we still see them incorporated in our society? If Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and other great people have inspired us to love our enemy and try to transform their thinking, that might be the core of what your program is offering. And for Steve, you give a very illuminating, important overview and specific view of Malawi and Africa, and the striving to make things happen there. I am so grateful that you could participate in the panel, especially emphasizing the relationship of Ubuntu and the other ways that it's spoken in different languages that's so connected with the Hindu and Indian perspective furthered by Gandhi. And then finally, so grateful to Dr. Jane for her beautiful, my dear video, for your incredibly illuminating start to our talk, where we can understand the importance of Gandhi and his principles, some of which we know very simply, but you always manage to give more angles and perspectives that we can continuously learn from and understand how Gandhian philosophy, the philosophy of nonviolence, can, and love, compassion, and non-harm, can be further understood and critically thought, to apply critical thought to our current problems. And thank you finally to Vedya and the wonderful Gandhi Smriti, and for sponsoring us. And we are so grateful. All of you, peace is not the action of great heroes or famous scholars. We all try to do our best, and peace depends on each one of you listening and all those you are connected to. Thank you.
Thank you.